Hey, what's up guys? Michael Corsentino with the companion video for my Shutter Magazine November 2016 lighting column. This month, it's top 10 lighting questions answered. So I wanted to take the opportunity to share with you answers to the most commonly asked lighting questions. I get these questions all the time, so I figured why not compile them and share them with you guys. So let's dig right in. First question is speed lights or strobes. When people are making purchasing decisions or they're considering what to invest in or how to expand their lighting toolkit, they're typically considering either speed lights or strobes. Most people start off with speed lights and then progress into strobes. So let's start off with that. That'll be question number one. So let's look at the differences between speed lights and strobes. They're both different tools with different capabilities, and they allow you to do different things. With speed lights, you're going to have a lower powered lighting tool. You're going to want to use it at, it's going to make, you can only use it with shorter distances compared to strobes. It is portable. They're lightweight. They are battery operated. Most now are TTL and high-speed sync enabled. You do have limited choices for modifiers with speed lights, more so than you used to, but they're still limited compared to strobes. They offer both manual and automatic modes for metering. They have wireless triggering, and they are comparable in costs at this point, currently, to many higher powered strobes. So let's look at higher powered strobes now. Obviously, as it says here, that's the first thing, that's the main, that's the big point of differentiation, is that strobes are higher powered. So in some cases 10 and 20 times. And that difference in power is going to give you a lot more flexibility and a lot more options creatively and technically. So that's one of the big benefits of a strobe compared to a speed light. You'll be able to use a strobe because of its higher power at longer distances from your subject. Many are now portable, many are also lightweight, many are battery operated, and many are also TTL and high-speed sync enabled. So there's really kind of a blurring of the lines in feature sets between speed lights, what you used to only be able to get in speed lights and what's available in larger strobes, higher powered strobes. There is also a wider range of modifiers, and you also have manual and automatic modes, just like you have in speed lights. You have wireless triggering, and many strobes are now comparably priced to some of the flagship models. Speed lights, like here we have pictured a Canon 600 EXRT, and we also have an Elinchrom BXR 500, or BRX 500, excuse me, and they're both about $600, give or take $100 here or there. So, you get a lot more bang for the buck, in my opinion. And again, everything that in this video is going to be subjective, and it's all just my preferences, and your mileage will vary. These are the tools that I've used, and what I find to work for me. You may love speed lights, and maybe speed lights work for you all the time. I use my speed lights less and less, and I end up using battery operated strobes and studio strobes more than anything, because I really enjoy the extra power that I'm given, and things are so portable now that I just find that it's worth the bit of extra money and a little bit more weight. I have a lot more options at my disposal. So when you are looking at studio strobes, as well as portable strobes, any kind of strobes, as opposed to speed lights, you've got lots of different options. And again, there are a lot of manufacturers making wonderful strobe products. These are just the tools that I have happened to use, or have used or own, but there are lots of others that I haven't, so that's why I'm not speaking to those. But like, let's say Photix makes great stuff. A lot of people are crazy about their Alien B equipment. They make great stuff, but even within each of those product lines, each of those manufacturers, different products do different things, and every strobe is a series of compromises. It's got things that it can do, and it's got things that it can't do, and that's really what I want to sort of bring home when you're looking at the choices and what products to invest in or to rent. You need to think about what it is that you want to do with those tools. They're all tools, and they all do different things. So I've got a couple of things that I use, and I'm going to talk about the reasons why and when I use them. So for example, we've got some portable strobes up here in the top row. We've got a ProPhoto 7B, which is a 1200 watt second pack and head system. We've got the Elinchrom Quadra 400, the ELB, which is a pack and head system, but it's a more portable system. It's 400 watt seconds, so it's less power by a third. And then we've got a ProPhoto 500 watt second B1, which has more power. And it's got some different features compared to the Quadra. For example, the ProPhoto will allow you to do high-speed sync, and it's also TTL enabled. However, if you're going to be hand-holding it for any length of time, you might not find it to be the ideal fit. It's great. It's got a lot of power. I love it. But if you're looking to move really quickly and to be really nimble and on your feet, I find the Quadra is a better fit. But however, the Quadra, again, everything's a series of trade-offs. The Quadra does not have TTL. It does have high-speed sync. They call it high sync. So it's really going to depend on what you want to do with these tools. If you are a dyed-in-the-wool TTL shooter, then you're probably going to want to go with the ProPhoto. I would argue that you really don't need TTL in all cases. There's a lot that you can do. I'm a manual guy, so I prefer manual. While I love the ProPhoto B1, the Quadra is lighter and easier to use. If I'm having an assistant hand-hold it, it's much easier for them to work with the ELB 400. But if I need more power and if I need to overpower the sun, then either the ProPhoto B1 or the Quadra 400 are going to leave me wanting for power, which is when I am going to opt for the 1200 watt second pack, the 7B, because it's going to give me a lot more power. It's going to give me the power that I need to overpower the sun, right? So each tool does different things. Now, if we are talking about the studio, we've got here a ProPhoto 2400 watt second pack on the left, and then we've got a couple heads from Elinchrom, their ELC line of heads. Now, why would I choose one over the other? Well, the 2400 watt second pack is going to allow me to use really large modifiers, and it's going to allow me to place them really far back, like 15, 20 feet. If I really need that coverage, if I'm doing a band or something, I need to put my light far back so that based on inverse square law, and if you guys are confused by what that means, look it up, Google it, or look at some of my previous articles. I have some articles in Shutter Magazine about inverse square law. Basically, it just has to do with light fall off. So if you want to photograph a group, you want to place your light back far. Also, if you want really contrasty light, you want to place your light back far. If you're using a really big modifier, you also need a lot of power. So those are the circumstances when I would use a 2400 watt second pack, because I'm going to need that power in order to do those things. Now, if I wanted certain features that are unavailable in that pack, like for example, the Elinchrom ELC is a dynamite digital head. That's another one of the differences. The packs that we're looking at here are, save for the ELB 400, are not digital. These are analog packs because they're less expensive. In the article, in the print magazine, you guys are seeing some of the digital versions of these packs because those are the only pictures that I could find from the manufacturers that were suitable for print. I, in my own studio, use the analog versions because they're available much less expensively on eBay, and some of them I owned already, legacy, before they were phased out and replaced with the digital versions. But the digital versions I end up using when I am at a studio and I'm renting equipment. But in my own studio, I find I use the analog packs because they're a lot less expensive. However, I do own and use these Elinchrom ELC heads. They are digital. They're amazing. They give you all the benefits of a digital head, but they also have some things that you cannot do with these other heads. With the ProPhoto heads. For example, they can do delayed shutter and they can do stroboscopic effects, and they have all sorts of really cool effects that really boost your creativity and allow you to do things that are just not possible with the ProPhoto packs that are pictured here. So again, it's just what you want to do with the tool that really should dictate what tool you're either renting or investing in. Every tool, again, is a series of compromises, and some do things like, for example, the ELC 1000, it's a great head, but if I want to place it 15 feet back from my subject and I want to use it in a 7-foot octabank, I may end up being a little short on power, if I want to shoot at f16 or f22. So that's where, I might end up opting for the 2400 watt second pack in that case. All right, so you guys get the point. All right, let's move on. How can I create hard, edgy light? So with any quality of light that you want to create, it's really going to be about a series of things. It's going to be about distance from your subject, the distance from your light from your subject, and it's also going to be about the modifier that you're using to create the light and the characteristics of that modifier. So let's take a look at some hard light. This is from a fashion test that I did, and I haven't run this piece yet in Shutter Magazine, but I'm going to write up a piece about this because this is a fun shoot and it speaks to creating hard light. But in a nutshell, hard light is all about the placement and the modifiers. So what you want to do is you want to use small reflectors or no modifier. You want to place your light far from the subject. You want to use minimal to no diffusion. And direct strobe orientation. So what do I mean by direct strobe orientation? What I mean is that the flash tube is going to be facing out toward your subject, into the reflector and out toward the subject, right? Whereas you'll see with soft light, we're going to be going the opposite direction if we can. And there are certain modifiers that will allow you to do that. But for harder, more punchy light, you want your light facing toward your subject, and you want more often than not to use a smaller reflector with a silver interior. All right, and again, that direct strobe orientation, no diffusion. You can use minimal diffusion if you want. The more diffusion that you use, the softer the look is going to be. But you can vary the hardness with diffusion. But typically, I end up not using that much diffusion, if any. Okay, so that's hard light. And next, the converse. How can I create soft light? Say exactly the opposite. So here's an example of soft light. This piece was covered in the August issue of Shutter Magazine. It goes into exactly how I created this entire look, so you'll definitely want to refer to that. But let's take a look at the tools and techniques that were used for that. So basically, to create soft light, just like the opposite of hard light, you want to use large modifiers for soft light. You want to place the light and that modifier very close to the subject. You want to use inner and outer diffusion, whereas in our hard light example, we use no diffusion. You want to have indirect strobe orientation. Again, just like we said in the other one where we had in hard light where we had our light facing toward our subject. Now we have our light, you can see here, facing in toward the back of the umbrella, right, or the octabank. And this is a 74-inch Elinchrom octabank, and it's indirect. So that you can get soft light without an indirect light orientation, but this is why I love this particular modifier, because that indirect orientation is going to give you it's going to maximize that soft quality of light. Now, also here you're seeing this reflector. I've left it the product shot without diffusion on, so you could see the orientation of the light. But you would have, doing this ideally, you would have interior diffusion happening here, right? And then you would have the exterior baffle, interior baffle and exterior diffusion over the entire thing. So you'd have two layers of diffusion. The inside is called the interior baffle, and the outside is called the diffusion panel. I don't know why they call them different things, but that's what they do. Okay, so then we've got feathered light. Okay, refer to the August video as well as issue, and you'll see I go into what feathered lighting is all about. But essentially, you're working with the edge of the light from the softbox, and that's where you're going to really get the softest quality of light. I also like to use a V-flat for the shadowed side of my subjects in order to open it up a little bit. It's going to soften the shadows that are happening and create a softer look. And then typically white or interior modifiers are going to give you a softer look. Now this Elinchrom is a silver interior modifier. However, it still gives you a really beautiful soft look. So that's not always the case, but it's a kind of a general rule of thumb. If you're looking at modifiers, and perhaps if they're not indirect, ideally you're going to want to look for a white interior modifier to give you a softer light, as well as a warmer toned light. A silver interior is going to give you a little bit of a colder tone light. How can I balance strobe and daylight? This is a question I get all the time. So here's an example of balancing ambient light and strobe. All right, so basically what I wanted to do was create a nice natural balance here between the two. So you want to remember two basic rules of thumb when you're thinking about this in your head. Flash power, aperture, and flash exposure compensation, if you're using TTL, control the amount of flash light contributed to an exposure. All right, so it's really as simple as that. the power of your flash, the aperture setting that you're using, and flash exposure compensation setting, if you're shooting TTL, are going to control how much flash is being contributed to the exposure, right? Shutter speed, on the other hand, is going to control the amount of ambient light that is contributed to the exposure, right? So the slower the shutter speed, the more ambient light is collected by the sensor. The faster the shutter speed, the less ambient light is collected. So if you wanted more ambient light, you would use a slower shutter speed, right? If you wanted less ambient light, if you wanted to knock down the amount of ambient light, too much ambient light, you would use a faster shutter speed, all right? So it's really that simple. You're working with two separate zones of light, right? And you need to think about them separately. So for flash, I'm going to use the flash power, obviously. I'm going to use the aperture. I'm going to use the flash exposure compensation in TTL, and that is going to dictate how much flash I'm seeing in the image. And for the ambient light, which is the dominant light source in an ambient flash situation, shutter speed is going to give me either more or less ambient light. It's really pretty simple. So don't overcomplicate it when you're thinking about it. All right, do I need a light meter? I love this topic. Yes, I would say yes. I know I do. So I love a light meter because it allows you to create really sophisticated lighting quickly and easily and accurately and repeatably. And here's an example of the kinds of effects that you can create when you're working with multiple zones of light. So for example, here we've got a zone of light for our edge lighting, we've got a zone of light for our background, and we've got a zone of light for our key light. Now for me, typically everything follows the key. So I start with the key light, and then I will, let's say the key light is F16, and I want to figure out, I want these lights here and here, perhaps a stop under or a stop over or whatever the effect is. With a light meter, I can quickly and easily determine what those relationships are. And the same thing with the background light. All right. So that really is the value of a light meter. Now I've called out a few of the other benefits. Okay, so again, a light meter is going to give you speed, it's going to give you accuracy, it's going to give you consistency, it's going to allow you to create repeatable results, it's going to help you when you're working with lighting zones, it's going to allow you to determine ratios between your lights. For example, 1 to 2 or half power to full power, etc. If I'm using the key light at f11 and I want my edge lights a stop under, that's -1. There's my ratio. It's going to allow me to meter flash, which your camera's meter will not allow you to do, okay, because the mirror on your DSLR is down. Therefore, your sensor, your meter can't meter flash when you're talking about manual flash. So a flash meter will allow you to meter flash rather than to be chimping and trying to figure out where your flash power should be. When you meter, you take a meter reading, you set everything up, you figure out what you want your aperture to be, what you want your f-stop to be, what you want your shutter speed to be. You take a meter reading, you dial in the flash until you get that meter reading, and then you follow suit with your camera settings, you make your first exposure, and your exposure is dead on. It's exactly what it should be. So that's the beautiful thing about working with a flash meter. You are also able to determine percentage flash readings. For example, in this shot that I showed you here, this is about a 20% contribution of flash. So I know that if I want a kind of balanced looking exposure, all I do is I take my meter and I hold it up and I take a meter reading, and the meter tells me you've got 20% from flash. And then I know, or if I got 30%, I know, oh, okay, I need to dial down my flash a little bit in order to give me a more balanced, natural looking effect. And so I know that 20% is my sweet spot. I just dial the flash power up or down in order to obtain that percentage reading using a meter, okay? So another one of the really beneficial things about using a meter. A meter is also really accurate because it meters using incident readings versus reflective readings. So an incident reading is the light that is falling on your subject rather than the light that is reflected from your subject. So it makes sense that different fabrics, different surfaces are going to reflect light at different intensities, which can fool your sensor. Okay, so an incident reading is always accurate because it's not reading light that is reflected. It's reading light that is falling on to your subject, so it's much more accurate. A meter will also allow you to do both kinds of meter readings, or many will anyway, if you have one that can do reflective as well as incident readings. So you can do a lot of things with both kinds of meter readings. It will allow you to determine averages. So you can average all your lights together and come up with one reading overall, which can be really useful as well. And you can determine brightness values. So for example, I could set my key light onto my subject, and then I could, if I was using a white background, I could, dial in a certain percentage using my meter, using the reflective meter reading through a spot meter. I'll use a spot meter attachment for this, and then I could make my background a certain value. I could turn it gray, I could turn it black, or anything in between, or I could make it white. Really easy. You can even take a gray background and make it white, but it's really easy to do with a meter because you can determine exactly what the percentage of light is. All right. So again, I can't get too deeply into that in this particular tutorial, but there are other tutorials that I've done where I explain it. So reference those. But a meter is something that you should be using. They're great, and you definitely want to use them if you're using Flash. What is the perfect modifier to use on location? Okay, the one that creates the light you want. And I'm not trying to be cheeky here, but it's the truth. Different modifiers create different looks. So there really is no one-size-fits-all modifier. It's going to depend on the look that you want to create. A softbox is going to give you a soft look. A reflector is going to give you a harder look. There are certain considerations when you're working on location. You want to think about size. You want to think about portability. But I've used 7-foot octabanks on location. Are they, a pain in the butt to use? Yes. Large umbrellas will blow around, and can take off like a sail. But it's really going to depend on the look that you want to create. I've used beauty dishes on location. So there really is no perfect solution for use on location. But you do want to think about what's going to, be easier to use than not. What should my power setting be when I'm using manual flash? Okay, so this is something that stumps a lot of people, and this really couldn't be simpler. So you've got quarter power, half power, full power, 1/64th power, 1/8 power. It's going to look different depending on whether you're using a speed light or whether you're using a strobe. But basically, what I like to do in all cases is find half power or 50% power, because this way it gives me 50% one way and 50% the other way. And you will eventually get to know, based on the kind of apertures that you like to use and the distance that you like to place your strobes and the particular equipment that you're using, what power setting is going to give you a predictable result, every time. And for me, typically, I like to start at about half power. And that's going to give me a good basis, a good starting point. And then you dial in your power from there, either using a meter or working intuitively and dialing your power up and down. So really simple. Manual is really simple. People are a little intimidated by it because I think the camera's not doing the work for them and the meter's not sort of setting everything up, but it really is pretty simple. You figure out where you want to be. And a handheld light meter is really going to help you do that. Okay, I'm new to lighting. What's the first thing I should know? Well, there are a lot of things that you should know, but one of the main things that I would say is you should know about off-camera flash. You should know that ideally you want to be taking your light off your camera, because when you do that, your lighting will improve tremendously because you will be creating light with direction. All right. So I wanted to pull together a couple examples here of light with no direction and light with direction. And if we are of like mind, I think you will find the directional light more interesting. It creates volume and a sculptural effect, and I just think it's got more drama and it's more interesting. Now, you can modulate the amount of shadow. It doesn't have to be this dramatic, but I think even with a more open-looking image, with a lighter, brighter image, and less shadowing, it's still a more interesting lighting when you have direction to your light. So here you can see we've got flat light on the left, and even that was off-camera lighting, but the light was pretty much on axis with the lens for the camera. And on the right we've got directional lighting. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things is you want to know, you want to take your light off the camera and then start investigating modifiers. What lighting accessories do I need? Well, that's a lot. There are a lot of different lighting accessories, and some really worthwhile and some not. And I wanted to give you some of what I think are the most useful bang for the buck. Some are very inexpensive, and some are more expensive than others. I would say one thing that I always like to recommend and that I always have with me are reflectors, diffusers, and subtraction panels. And one of my favorite portable lightweight kits is the Last-A-Light Tri-Flip 8-in-1 Grip Reflector Kit. It's 30 inches. I've given you the model number. This is really cool. I typically have 2 of them with me, and it allows you to do a whole range of things from diffusing the sun to popping a flash through it, speed light or strobe. It allows you to reflect light with different qualities of light. It's got all sorts of different fabrics from white to gold, silver, and everything in between, combinations of both. And it's got a black fabric as well, so you can subtract light as well and introduce more shadow if you need to. So typically I like to have 2 of those because it'll allow you to bounce light from underneath, for example, and diffuse light from above if you're doing a clamshell lighting arrangement. Very inexpensive and very useful. Also grids. Grids are kind of another one of those must-have tools. Soft egg crate grids if you're using soft boxes or octabanks, and hard grid spots if you're using reflectors or beauty dishes. So I've called out a few of my favorites here. Light Tools makes great grids. Their soft egg crate grids are the best in class. And Mola, I have pictured here a grid spot for their Mola Rayo, which was pictured earlier. But, all manufacturers, or I should say most, make grid spots. So you'll want to investigate grids. What they allow you to do is to really channel the light into a small controllable pool and really place the light where you want it, which is key when you're really trying to get, dialed in with your lighting and you want to create a very specific look. It's kind of the exact opposite of an umbrella. An umbrella is going to put light everywhere, and a grid is really going to put the light precisely where you want it. And they come in different degrees, and the tighter the degree, the smaller the number. 10 degree, for example, is going to give you a very, very tight pool of light, where a 40 or 50 degree grid is going to give you a much wider pool of light. But in any event, any grid, even a 50-degree grid, is going to give you a much tighter pool or channel of light than a modifier with no grid, right? So grids are definitely a must. If I can only afford one modifier, which should it be? Again, this is, subjective, but I would say if you're just starting out and you want to learn about lighting and you don't have a big budget, a convertible umbrella is a must. First of all, it's a multi-purpose tool. It allows you to use it shoot through or bounce back, which you're seeing here, or you can use it as an octa. Many of the most popular convertible umbrellas now come with diffusion panels, which you're seeing on this one. This is my favorite. It's the Last-A-Light 41-inch 8-in-1 umbrella, and again, I've included the model number there for you. Very, very useful tool. Allows you to do a whole range of things, many not included here because there are 8 different things that you can do with this umbrella, as the name would imply. But they're portable, they're lightweight, they have swappable interior fabrics. They do, however, have limited light shaping control. Not as much when you're using it as an octa, you have more control. You have a definite edge. But if you're using it just as an umbrella, light tends to kind of go everywhere. But it's a great tool to start with. So that's what I would recommend. All right. So that's going to wrap it up, guys, for my 10 most popular lighting questions. Obviously, I'm sure that there are tons more, and I'm happy to answer them. So do post your questions on the Shutter Magazine or Shutterfest Facebook page, and also feel free to put them in the YouTube comments or hit me up anywhere on my social media channels, and I would be happy to answer your questions. And I will see you guys again next month here in Shutter Magazine. Take care.